Why did Alexander the Great get super mad at his own tutor, Aristotle? I'll tell you in just a second. But first, my name is Britton the Tulip. I am the president of Blue Manners Online Academy. I'm also the author of the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series and Revealing School. So Aristotle was brought in to be Alexander the Great's tutor by his father, Philip of Macedonia. And Aristotle gave Alexander a great education. Alexander was grateful for it. And then Aristotle did something that really ticked Alexander off. He took that great education that he had given Alexander the Great and he published a book for everybody. Well, actually not for everybody. Your average guy could not afford a book back then because it took forever. You'd have to hire these scribes and it'd take them forever to transcribe these books. Books were really expensive. But it gave all of the other elites of Europe and Asia and Africa access to this book. All of Alexander's rivals and enemies now could have access to this special elite education that Aristotle provided Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great was so upset, he writes this letter and he's like, "How dare you? You just rendered my whole education useless. I'm so upset with you. Thanks a lot for nothing. Everybody now has this special elite information that you gave me." Now Aristotle defends himself. He's like, "Don't worry. I didn't give it to everybody and they won't even understand everything because they didn't get your special tutoring that I offered you." He tried to appease them that way. But this is an important point. The elites of this world have always tried to control education and keep real education out of the hands of their rivals and, of course, especially the masses. And this is what kind of keeps them on top because education, knowledge is really powerful. Alexander understood that, and that's why he got mad at Aristotle. Now, we think we're under this illusion things have changed and that now everybody gets free education because we live in an equal, free, and democratic society. And thanks to the printing presses and now the internet, pretty much everybody has access to the same information. So we think, hey, things are equal. Thank God we don't live back in those days when the elites kept us away from a good education. Well, the elites were already 2 steps ahead of us. Let's just say that the people who rule the world, they were already 2 steps ahead. They said, look, with the printing presses and now the internet, we can no longer keep these people from information. It's out there. It's available. Everybody's going to be able to get an education. So here's what we'll do. We'll pretend like we're pro-education. We will force them to go to schools, government schools, as if the parents themselves want to work them to death in coal mines. Maybe a few, but let's just act like parents are detrimental to their own kids. They want to keep them and use their own kids, keep them from an education. So the big government's going to step in and mandate that you have to go to a school to get an education because big government wants to make you smart and intelligent to keep them accountable. And of course, these corporate elites, these bankers who run the world. Right. That's what they want you to believe. So what they do is they create a 2-tiered education system that most people don't realize. They create public school for the masses. If you can't afford it, you get to go for free. Don't worry, they'll take that out of your pocket when you become a middle-class laborer. You'll pay for that free education for your kids and the future kids to come. So you're going to pay for this education, but they're going to force you to go to their schools. They're going to have this illusion of freedom because they're saying, well, you don't have to go to the schools. You can go to a private elite prep school if you can afford it, or a private school if you can afford it. And then, of course, there's homeschooling now, which is a great option. We'll talk about that later. And they were very much against it. And these elites are trying to get rid of homeschooling because it's actually kind of throwing the system off. Thankfully for them, most homeschoolers educate in the model of the public schools, so it's not a huge threat, but it's starting to become a threat. Create this system. It looks like equality. Everybody's getting a free education, but you go to the public education system and you're actually getting a miseducation. You get educated the same as everybody else, which renders your education basically worthless because everybody else knows the same thing. We've talked about this in other videos. So when you get out and you've learned all this stuff, you're still only qualified to work at McDonald's. Even that's not true because you didn't have to go through this public education system to work at McDonald's. I don't think you have to have a degree to work there. So really you have a worthless education. You might be able to rise above that, start your own business. But again, you could have done that if you hadn't gone through public education anyway. They create that system. Then they create a separate system to raise up their own children, and it is known as the elite prep schools. These are not private schools, as I said before. The tuition is usually $30,000 to $50,000 a year, and the education style is totally different. Way, way better. It's the equivalent of back in the day, books. Think of it that way. Books were maybe $50,000 in their money. Okay. In other words, the average laborer couldn't afford books back then. They could create a private library. They could educate their kids. Now everybody can get a hold of books, so they've created a separate system. They're going to make your kids read stupid books, and they're going to make it common, and they've designed a system to set up your kids to be middle-class laborers for them. Their kids go to elite prep schools, put on a totally different education track, and it costs a ton of money, so that keeps your kids out of their kids' schools. Perfect example, Obama, he's totally against school choice. He wants your kids to go to the public education system where they get their mediocre education. But of course, his daughters go to Sidwell Friends, an elite prep school. I think he probably paid, I'm guessing, unless they gave him a discount, he probably paid about $80,000 a year, maybe, for his girls to go to that school, Sidwell Friends. But remember, education's equal, it's all fair, right? That's what they want you to believe. Your kids are getting a good quality education. It's important to realize even 1,000 years or 2,000 years, everybody's always known that education is powerful, and the elites have always tried to keep your kids from it. Public education is the modern way to keep your kids undereducated or miseducated so that the elites have the advantage. That's just one more aspect of how your kids are being set up for failure in the public school system. Thankfully, we have homeschooling for now. The elites are definitely trying to get rid of that. If you figure out how to educate in the mold of the elites, which I will teach you. I talk about it a ton in my series, The Art of Raising Children for Greatness. If you can figure out what they're doing differently in the prep schools than the public schools, then you could actually set your kids up for success in your own home schools. The problem is, like I've said many times, most homeschoolers believe in public education. They just think it's kind of broken. And so they're following the same path. They're just doing a better job. But in the end, you're on the same track as the public schoolers. You've actually set your kids up for failure. They might be a little bit advanced. They definitely are maybe better behaved, or there's different aspects like that that are better about homeschooling for sure. But as far as the life track goes, your kids are kind of set up for the same life track. And in the end, because public education really didn't matter anyway, your kids graduate high school knowing more, but basically in the same position because nobody cares about your high school transcripts or GPA. If you would like to know more, you can get a free copy of one of the chapters in Revealing School just to get you started. If you want to know how to raise your kids for greatness, whether you're homeschooling or not, you can read The Art of Raising Children for Greatness. Start with the book on education. That's the first book in the series. Thank you guys so much, and talk to you later.